All right, here we are. So we are a little over a week away from seeing some major changes to rosters. So not a lot of lead time for me to do the Dallas one today and the Tampa one tomorrow. They of course lost the finals last night in six, and if that's a spoiler, it's been over 12 hours, dude. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, Dallas. Now it's about the road forward, and you get to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's great. They didn't win it in the end, so the task still remains uncompleted. Jim Nill, general manager, coach, likely Rick Bowness. All signs seem to point to Rick Bowness returning as general or as the coach next year. Jim Nill is entrenched as general manager. He's bought himself at least 2 to 3 years off this Stanley Cup Finals run, so it's worked out pretty well for everybody except the guys who wanted that Stanley Cup ring. And when you look at the Dallas roster, there are some reasons to think that changes need to be made. And to me, Radulov's been the one that stands out as maybe being on the block coming out of these playoffs. Sagan, I know people are going to say Sagan should be on the block. He didn't get a goal in the last 15 games of the playoffs. I don't know how much right now you would get for Sagan. I don't know how much value he has. I know Sagan is still young. Sagan's still in his 20s. He's just been in the league forever, so it feels like he's older than he is. But I don't know how much value he has right now. Jamie Benn, his contract's been problematic for the last couple of years. He had a really good part of that run when they got past Vegas, and then against Tampa, it sort of fell apart again. So with Ben, this is how it works. He's great one night, and the next, he doesn't seem to be the same player that he was, say, 5 years ago. Joe Pavelski had a great playoff run after what was sometimes a frustrating regular season for him. It was a struggle with him getting acclimated to Dallas and all of that. But once he got going in those playoffs, he was arguably their best forward. Alex Radulov, as I mentioned, Radulov, good game, bad game, and I know there's people who love Radulov. The good news is he's probably going to end up being on the block. If you love Radulov, your team might have a chance to grab him. Denis Gurianov, of course, had very good goal-scoring runs here and there, but then it does dry up. And I think Gurianov's going to end up being a good 20-goal scorer in the NHL. I don't know about 30, and I don't know about being a star player either. I think Gurianov is just going to be one of those guys. He's a good second-tier, middle-six guy, but I don't know if he's going to become an elite scorer on any level. Of course, Rope Hintz. Hintz has proven that he can score, he can play defensively, he can kill penalties. He's a bit of a Swiss Army knife out there. Jason Dickinson still has an outside chance of developing into a top six forward. I don't know that he does. I don't know that he does. But what he showed in the Stanley Cup Finals was he will play on one leg. He will play when he's hurt. And he plays well when he's hurt. Not only that, but he shot blocks even while he's hurt. When he's on one leg, he shot blocks with the good one. So Dickinson is a heart and soul kind of guy, and so he may end up working his way into a top six role at some point. I haven't given up on that for him. And of course, I have to mention Yoel Kiviranta, who had the hat trick in a big game, and I think that probably has people overestimating what he might be going forward. I like Kiviranta, don't get me wrong, but I think that coming out of any Stanley Cup run like what Dallas has had, you're going to see some players potentially being overestimated going forward. So Kiviranta may end up getting a top six role. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. And also outside chance, I guess, to Faksa as well. Faksa, you see that offense at times, but he's good on faceoffs. They really missed him when he was out of the lineup, too. Top four defense, you've got Lindell, Klingberg, Alexiak, and Heiskanen. And Heiskanen plays on that second pairing behind Klingberg, but those guys play half the game. So about 30 minutes for Klingberg and about 30 minutes for Heiskanen. Heiskanen, it's just the tip of the iceberg with him, what he's going to be. Klingberg had arguably the best hockey of his career played in these playoffs. And so Klingberg's stock is really high right now. Lindell played very, very well. Ton of ice time for Esa Lindell, one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. And Alexiak really stepped it up. Alexiak, absolutely. I was very anti-Alexiak, say, 3-4 years ago. Right now, Jamie Alexiak looks fantastic. Solid, top four defenseman. And, I don't really have anything bad to say about him. Now, going next year, if Stephen Johns can come back and be healthy, Stephen Johns could very well be a top 4 defenseman for Dallas. It makes a difference when he's not in the lineup. And I've got Thomas Harley on the board just because he is a top draft pick. He may very well wind up in a top 4 role, but I'm not sure how he pushes any of these guys out of that top 4. So it's an excellent defense in that you have the offense, you have the defense, you have the physical side with Alexiak, who was shot blocking like crazy in the playoffs. And so this is a pretty solid top 4, and it tells you that Dallas at the very least should be a playoff team next year. Whether or not they're a contender, it's going to depend on what Jim Nill does from here. If Jim Nill looks at this team and says, well, they got to the final, I'm not going to touch anything, then that may actually lead to hurting the team. If he looks and he actually says, you know what, we still need to make some improvements, and he goes out to do that, that may very well be a good thing. Bishop still projects as being the number 1 goaltender next year, injured throughout most of this run to the finals, and Jake Ottinger may very well end up being the backup. Ottinger is seen as the future in net for Dallas. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, of course, I've debated on this channel for years. Goalie of the future, that whole thing. But Ottinger, if he is the goalie of the future, he may end up being the backup of the present next season. So, and I say that because they have $15.5 million in cap space. So you can look at that and say, well, Dallas has a lot of cap space, right? They're good. But then you look at the UFAs that are leaving, and you need to replace them. Matthias Janmark, I think, is gone. And I like Janmark's compete level. I do. No finish. He has virtually no finish. And so I can see them moving on from him. I could see Janmark going to a team like, Colorado. Colorado likes to pick up bottom 6 guys who are, hard workers. Janmark's a hard worker. He's got a lot going for him. He doesn't really have that finish, though. Corey Perry, we'll see if Perry decides to come back. It's going to have to be on probably another cheap contract. I don't know how interested he'd be in that. If Perry goes to market, there will be teams that call for him that would not have called for him if we didn't have the return for playoffs. Much like Pavelski during the regular season, Perry struggled as a Dallas Star. There was large swaths of time that he was not a positive. And then playoff time, he amped it up. And what's interesting is, the last couple of times the Ducks were in the playoffs, Perry wasn't necessarily a positive, especially that last time for them. But this time around for Dallas, it worked. And he kind of did a little bit of everything that you need to do to win. They just didn't get the last 2 wins as needed in that Stanley Cup Finals. Andre Sekera, I liked Sekera. If he wants to stick around and be a top 6 guy, I could see him being on that third pairing. He won't cost them a lot of money. He showed a lot of heart and soul in that final series as well against Tampa. He was clearly not 100%, and yet he was doing everything he could to get back out on the ice and play. And those guys are the ones that will get you over the top. That is something that will get you over the top. Anton Khudobin had an amazing run in the playoffs. It reminds me of Urbe when he had that great run for Carolina. I love Khudobin. Don't believe that this necessarily means he's a starting goaltender. Don't believe that this means that there's going to be GMs lining up to give him big money in the offseason. I don't think that happens. I think his asking price goes up. I don't think it goes that high. And I don't think the expectation for next year should be that he's a starter anywhere either. I love Khudobin. If Vancouver couldn't keep Markstrom and they brought in Khudobin on a 1 or a 2 year contract for less than they were going to pay Markstrom, and you have Khudobin and Demko, I'd be happy, because then Khudobin would have played for all 3 of my favorite teams, and he can be a good stopgap until DiPietro theoretically is ready for Vancouver after. But you can't get caught up in what happened in this run and overestimate him from here. Khudobin is a very good, ideally 1B goaltender or your backup, but he is solid. And so I do wish him the best. If last night was his last game in Dallas, or in a Dallas jersey, I should say, then I have nothing bad to say about his time in Dallas, and he was great. And I think all Dallas fans would agree with me on that. Now, restricted free agents, this is where the money really starts to add up. Radek Faksa, Rope Hintz, and Denis Gurianov. So all 3 of these guys are going to want raises, and you can argue, I would say Faksa's what, $3 million? Rope Hintz, $3 million. Maybe you get them for $3 million. Gurianov, how much for him? $2.5 million? $2 million? Do you give them all bridge contracts so they can show what they can do, and then you risk losing them as unrestricted free agents after? Do you try to give Hintz a long-term contract? Do you try to give Fox a long-term contract? A lot of questions to be answered by Jim Nill. Jim Nill has some work to do. So that $15.5 million, they do have cap space. They do. But once you've signed these three guys, that cap space is going to be down to probably around $6, maybe $7 million. I would not rule out Dallas bringing somebody in. But when you've got these unrestricted free agents potentially leaving or re-signing, if Perry re-signed for $1.5 million, and if these guys signed for, say, a combined $8 million, you're already down to, being closer to the cap than you might want to be before free agency. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, whether or not Ottinger does get that backup spot. And in terms of the draft, well, tune in to the live stream on October 6th because they have the number 30 pick because they were Stanley Cup finalists and lost. But they don't have their own second or third round picks, and they didn't acquire any others either. So unless Jim Nill goes out and acquires another draft pick for the second or third round over the next week, it's going to be a quiet year for Dallas when it comes to draft picks. They're one of those, sort of to me that they could go either way. This could be a team that next year comes back. They're top 3 in their division. They're really tough to beat in the playoffs. I could also see a scenario where they fall out of the playoffs and they're one of these shock teams that goes to a final and misses the playoffs next year. It really could go either way. Very, very unpredictable in terms of the Dallas Stars and what might happen, but I'll be interested to see what happens, and of course I'm proud of them. I got Stanley Cup patches for this year. I got 2 of them I ordered. They arrived yesterday, and so they will be affixed to the Dallas and Tampa jerseys of my choosing, and I'll wear them with pride. Yes, hockey teams that I cheer for in the time that I've watched hockey in the Stanley Cup Finals between Vancouver and Dallas, including the Minnesota North Stars and Boston, they have 2 wins in a Stanley Cup Final and 11 losses. The win for Boston was against Vancouver, so technically I didn't cheer that victory as much because I wanted Vancouver to win that Stanley Cup. And in 99, of course, Dallas wins the Cup on a very controversial goal that people still complain about to this day. So I haven't really had that pure joy moment that Tampa fans had last night. Maybe someday I have it, but I'm starting to think it never happens. And that's part of the reason why. So when these guys went to the final, people were like, so were your feelings hurt when they lost? Well, not really, because I didn't think they were going to win it anyways, but okay. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding Dallas and what they need to do. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.